All right, welcome in, folks. I'm Jake Ellenbogen, your host at JE Live, and joining me is an old friend who we were actually just talking. It's been a minute. I'm trying to get back in the swing of things, having people on. I call them experts. I wanted to bring on a Texans expert himself, Cole Thompson. How you doing, man?
Buddy, it's been far too long since we've talked. It's been far too long since we've seen the NFL on our television screens. But we got Thursday, and then we get Friday, and then we get Sunday, and we're right back in the swing of motion for two teams that honestly could maybe make a run to the Super Bowl. Also could be very disappointing depending on what happens with maybe this being a tone setter for the rest of the season. We genuinely don't know, and that's what makes this game a lot of fun.
I 100% agree, and I think, you look at these two teams, and it's so fascinating. I don't think I realized it until I was doing prep, and I was like, wait, both teams lost kind of the same way. I mean, the Rams was a little bit closer, of course, but, that's a 9-point loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. They go on to the AFC Championship. The Rams lose to the Eagles. They win, the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. So, yeah, it's a lot of different things there, but, the Texans, it's really kind of interesting how far they got, despite the fact that, a CJ Stroud kind of not fell off, but he wasn't the same quarterback he was in his rookie season. And so maybe that kind of speaks volumes to how dangerous this team can be.
I agree. I always push back when people say he fell off, only because of you got to look at the situation around him. They started off the year having three receivers that were top 20 in fantasy points with Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, and Nico Collins. And they only played, I think, a grand total of 52 snaps together over the course of a season because of, you saw the injury to Nico Collins, hamstring, week 5. He's out for 5 weeks. 3 weeks later, Stephon Diggs tears his ACL in a non-contact injury against the Indianapolis Colts. You get back Nico Collins, and then less than 3 weeks later, you lose Tank Dell on a severe injury with the torn ACL, the MCL, the LCL. So you never were able to build that trifecta that people really wanted to see out in Houston with this pass attack for Bobby Slowick because of they weren't on the field enough at the same time to be able to have the identity. The offensive line was dreadful. Chris Strausser was one of the worst hires, I think, in the last 10 years for the Texans. And that includes guys like Lovie Smith and David Culley because of, at least with them, they went after people who knew how to develop offensive linemen. Strausser just couldn't get it done. The pressure rate was up. The inability to have a constant 5-man front was up. The regression that we saw even more from Kenyon Green, who was traded this offseason. The major regression from Shaq Mason at the right guard spot. Stroud just was under duress. He didn't have a constant weapon. When you lose a guy in Joe Mixon in the backfield for several drives, you have to kind of play a little bit up tempo. And he still threw for nearly 4,000 yards and 20 touchdowns. So it wasn't regression. It wasn't the same amount of production that he had when he set the tone in 2023 as a rookie. But that happens. And, Houston in that game against Kansas City, they had their moments. They were driving the ball efficiently. There were a couple of really heinous penalties against the defense. The Will Anderson play was one. The Henry To'oTo'o play for the roughing the passer that he never even touched Patrick Mahomes was another. Not reasons why this game ended the way it did, because at the end of the day, 3 fourth down calls, 3 all-out blitzes, the inability to protect CJ Stroud, the missing of assignments and blocks was the ultimate nail in the coffin for Houston. But it was a game that there were moments where Houston did look like the more complete roster. They just were very faulty in one major area, which was the pass protection. And that was why you fired Bobby Slowick, you fire Chris Strausser, you bring in Nick Caley, who you guys know very well out in Los Angeles, and what he was able to do with the tight end position. You hire internally Cole Popovich, who you talk to people around the league, they felt like that the positive things that were coming out of Houston in the offensive line was because of Popovich's teachings. And now you bring in 4 new players that hopefully will be balanced pieces long-term out at NRG Stadium. And even if they're not long-term, they're good enough to get you to another 11-win season, an AFC South championship, and maybe this year being the one that you get over the hump of being in the divisional round. The Texans have been in the playoffs. I think it's now 7 times in the franchise's history. They find a way to win in the wild card round. And in this new era underneath D'Amico Ryans, they find a way to win in the wild card round despite being the underdog by double digits to a team that everyone is picking to win that game. And then they lose in the divisional round. That is something that you want to see change in year 3.
No, that's a great point. Because they are a team, like I was looking at the last 5 times the Rams have played the Texans, they're 4-1, 2-0 in the McVay era. this is clearly the best team that the Rams have ever seen, from the Texans, I would say. So, that is interesting, kind of looking at a team that is good. We see a lot of teams in sports that are good enough to just like win a playoff game and then they can't get over that hump. The Texans are in year 3 of this thing with Stroud. So it's not like, it's the end all be all, like, okay, if they don't do it this year, it's never going to happen. But it is interesting. They do feel like the favorites in that division. This feels like one of the better games of the week for sure. Anytime you get kind of an intra conference game, it's always kind of fun to start a season that way. But when you get two teams that are kind of parallel in the sense that they both, their seasons both ended in a divisional round against a team that ends up going to the Super Bowl, I think that's pretty cool about this one. So I want to ask you your thoughts on the Rams, because you kind of, already alluded to the idea you think the Texans are like basically going to win around 11 games this year. Where do you see the Rams on that totem pole opposite of the Texans?
For me, they're a really big wild card, Jake. Like, I really wish I had an answer for them, because it's hard for me ever to doubt Sean McVay. Like, it really is hard for me to doubt that he is not going to be able to get you to 10 wins. It's really hard for me to doubt Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford, in my opinion, has been one of the most underappreciated, talked about quarterbacks in the last 50 years because of, we don't mention the titles. We always mention the accolades. And we're like, well, look at what he's done and how he's been so productive and what he meant to the city of Detroit. But then people say, well, look at the accolades. Like, it's not Dan Marino-esque. Like, I believe Dan Marino, from a talent standpoint, may be one of the best pure passers in NFL history. But people don't talk about him in that light because if he went to one Super Bowl and he did nothing else for the rest of his career. And it's not at that level because of just the way that Stafford plays, but Stafford has earned the right to be in that conversation of, we need to talk about him more. What he's provided as the spark for organizations has been detrimental to their success. And when you look at where the team is without him, it's very understood that there's a reason why regression sets on in. But when I look at Los Angeles, what are we going to get from him at 37 years old, coming off of another injury, and more importantly, an offseason where he did miss the majority of all of OTAs, the beginning of training camp? He's back, but he also is a hit away from maybe you having to put him on the IR for 4 games and trust in Jimmy Garoppolo. So it's like really interesting because I like the defense. I like the defensive front. I think that Braden Fisk and Jared Verse are two of the better picks in the Les Snead era over the last 5 years. I like the way the offensive line is built. I like the way they've spent money on the offensive line. They haven't oversplurged, but they've made right investments on positional players that they think are good foundational spots. And I like the fact that they've gone out and they've added in more depth to the running back room, and they've put their money where their mouth is with Kyron Williams. And they weren't afraid to cut ties with Puka Nacua because they knew they were landing at Devontae Adams. So the roster, I still think, is in that 12-win range if it's fully healthy. But Stafford to Garoppolo is a drop-off. And as much as we want to talk about it, it's not maybe the biggest drop-off in the NFL, it's a drop-off. So that changes the way that I view them if Stafford is to miss any games because of injury or because of where the offensive line isn't able to protect him. And it is something that I am monitoring in this game, especially with the Ulrich Jackson situation with the blood clots. And then, of course, you have Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter coming off of the edge. Their floor to me is 10-7. Like, they're a playoff team. They're the 7th seed in the wild card round in a very, very daunting NFC. The ceiling for me is 12-5. It all just is based off of Matthew Stafford's health.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair, and it really does come down to Matthew Stafford. I do think, and just based on what I've heard, throughout Rams camp and whatnot, they're very high on Garoppolo. So if anything were to go down, they trust him more than I would say the majority of people out there. But yeah, I mean, Matthew Stafford is what I think separates this team from a lot of other teams. When you're talking about teams that have a lot of different pieces but don't have that quarterback that's already been there, done that, I mean, I give the nod to the Rams. I do think this is one of the best teams in the league, and I think the offense, people don't realize, like, they have been waiting, and they didn't want to do it in a way that disparaged him or, kind of, I guess just disrespected him because of everything he's meant to the team. But Cooper Kupp was not Cooper Kupp the last 2 years. And, now you get a guy like Devontae Adams who, you watched the film last year, Cole, and I don't think that guy's dropped off much. And if he has, you need a microscope to see how far he's dropped off, because, I mean, the stuff that you were seeing at the end of last year with Aaron Rodgers, like having fun again playing football, I mean, you hear what he's doing in camp. You hear what he means to this team, and I think he's going to have a bigger year than Nakua. So, yeah, I think it's really interesting. The defense looks really good. And then I think like the Texans, on my side, I mean, I see them probably winning that division. The Colts are interesting. Not sure what to make of that. I think Daniel Jones might be a decent fit with Steichen, but I'm taking CJ Stroud over him any day. And the Jaguars, it's kind of like show me, don't tell me. I've been hearing about Trevor Lawrence forever. I'm not overly impressed with Trevor Lawrence personally. And then the Titans are interesting because they have a rookie. So, I like a lot of what they did last year, but I had an issue with the quarterback position. This year, I really do like Cam Ward. I'm just not sure. I think the Texans are clearly the favorites to win that division. And I think the Rams are the favorites to win the NFC West. So it is interesting. So Cole, what are your thoughts when I say give me some key Texans in this game? Maybe some guys that like the Rams fans don't know. Like who are those guys that kind of stand out to you?
Well, okay, so Ariante Ursary, who's going to be playing left tackle in this game, is going to have to be pretty much an X factor from the second that he steps on the field. And he has the blessing in disguise, and it's not an insult to anybody else out there because if you have great pass rushers, but you don't have a combination of Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson as your practice dummies to get ready for a game on Sundays. Like that's what he goes up against every single practice. But Jared Verse is built different. I mean, the way that Jared Verse approaches from the 2-point stance versus the 4-point stance that he's so used to seeing is going to be a little bit of a different feel because of it doesn't allow him to have that extra step to get in motion. And Verse is a violent pass rusher. He's got great agility. He wins with not only finesse, but he wins with just brute strength that he can put you on your ass so quickly that he is in the backfield before a quarterback even knows what's hitting him. And that is going to be an assignment for Ariante Ursary. So if you can take him out of this game and make Jared Verse a one dimension, you may end up getting Braden Fisk coming off of the edge and the 4 gap to be, or the B gap to be able to make plays where he's going up against Laken Tomlinson or he's going up against Ed Ingram. And that ends up being a reason why you still get pressure in the backfield, but it's going to be because if they're taking out Jared Verse, they're focusing so much of the attentiveness on the reigning defensive rookie of the year and how well he has played. I think Jake Andrews going up against Kobe Turner is going to be another key matchup. This is the center that was handpicked by Cole Popovich. They had 3 guys that were competing for the job throughout the entire offseason. Andrews was injured all of last year playing for the New England Patriots. But Popovich's relationship isn't from New England with Jake Andrews. It's actually from his time at Troy when he was the offensive line coach underneath John Summerall. So that is something that where you're going to have him kind of set the tone in this game, really do a good job of calling out when they make the shifts at the line of scrimmage and get those plays that are going to be able to open up the running creases for whether it be Damian Pierce or whether it be Nick Chubb or Dare Agumbawale or even Woody Marks on certain downs. Because without Joe Mixon in this game, they're going to rely heavily on a running back by committee approach. And I don't think one of these guys is going to fully transcend and take over the game. Christian Kirk on offense at the wide receiver spot is going to be really interesting because of, I think that you look at what am I blanking? Nick Haley. You look at his offensive personnel. It's not predicated all Sean McVay-esque because he only spent 2 years with Sean McVay, but there's a lot of Sean McVay traits that you've noticed throughout camp that really do stand out. And one of which is the utilization of the tight end and also the slot receiver role, where the slot receiver is not just running slot receiver routes. That's kind of been the beauty of what is Kaylee's offense is by going out and adding in a Christian Kirk, getting a Jalen Knoll from Iowa State. These are 2 players that can win past 8 or 9 yards. They will play 17-yard post patterns. They will run 15-yard comeback routes. And that's not accustomed to what Houston is used to seeing when it comes to their patterns of routes and concepts in the slot. So he has been a really nice find. I think the big thing that we talk about when it comes to him is that it's not his fault he got overpaid out in Jacksonville. You take the money and you run, and then you hopefully live up to the expectations. But he's always been a wide receiver too. And he didn't have that running mate when he was in Jacksonville most of those years. And when he did get Brian Thomas, he got hurt in the process. So didn't really get to build that acclimation about being that wide receiver too. He has that guy in Nico Collins that is going to get that double coverage. He's going to be the one that people are targeting and putting the big red Sharpie around to take the tops off of defenses and make sure that you keep him in front of you, which is going to open the running lanes for Christian Kirk to win across the middle of the field. Defensively, I think that Azeez Al-Shaair is going to have a big game. I think that Christian Harris is probably going to have the bigger one because Christian Harris, he is going to play the spy role. He is going to be fully attentive on Kyron Williams. He's going to be attentive on what you see from Terrence Ferguson and Tyler Higbee at the tight end spot. The role of the taking away the flats and making Matthew Stafford beat you downfield is going to be very, very prognostic on him. It's also going to be very prognostic on Jalen Petrie. Petrie moved from the safety position to the nickel position, and he instantaneously became one of the league's better run defenders. He was great in the short yardage situations in man coverage rate. Pro Football Focus graded him out as a top 5 nickel last year. He got paid this offseason. So he's going to have that opportunity to win against slot receivers, tight ends, running backs out of the backfield to make you, again, force it downfield, where in coverage you got Kamari Laster on one side and Derek Stingley Jr. on the other side. In the interior, the guy that I'm looking most for in this matchup is Sheldon Rankins. Rankins is the ideal fit for what DeMeco Ryans wants in his defensive tackles. He is a player that wins with lower body center of gravity to get underneath the offensive lineman and play his way into the backfield. Part of the reason he got paid an extensive amount by Cincinnati was what he was able to accomplish in this DeMeco Ryans system. And he told us when he signed back on, it's literally like riding a bike. He didn't forget anything. He kind of just picked up the handlebars and got right back to work. He won the starting job immediately out of camp. They're all going to be role players that I think either put pressure on Matthew Stafford in this offense or put pressure on Jared Verse in this defense, that if you're able to win those battles, those little minute areas, this may be a very significant win for the Houston Texans in the way that they've gone about the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot, Cole, and obviously that's why I bring you on, because you're very thorough. I always appreciate that. I myself, very thorough about the Rams, and man, I just everything, the details on Jake Andrews, I feel like I know more about this team. You can only do so much prep, but I feel like, you know, obviously you always have the little tidbits that I think people miss, so I always appreciate that about you. Looking at like the key matchups, like you mentioned, Ursery against like a Jared Verse, I think that's intriguing. Alec Jackson versus Will Anderson Jr. is going to be interesting. Rob Havenstein, his biggest issue that I've noticed, you know, throughout his career, and I think he's great, but his biggest issue are those more uber athletic outside linebackers. So Danielle Hunter could pose a threat for sure. Then you look at a guy like, you know, Devontae Adams going up against Derek Stingley, I would imagine, and then Lassiter against Nakua. Nico Collins versus Akello Witherspoon, I think, is also a huge matchup there because, you know, Akello does have the size to match up to Nico Collins. He has the speed as well. And we saw at the beginning of last year, I mean, Nico Collins can blow up a game early on. I mean, he is a dog. And, you know, then you have guys that I'm really fascinated about, like a Jaden Higgins, who I absolutely loved in this draft, was one of my top receivers. And I'm curious to see how they use the Iowa State guys. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch because, you know, this is a good team. Like, this is a really good team. And I think last year, Cole, the issue with the Rams is that, you know, they start off the season, you know, Darius Williams, their starting cornerback, is banged up, and, you know, Trey White now has to be the number one corner, and he was not ready to do that. And then you have all sorts of injuries. You know, Nakua goes down in the second quarter. 4 of the 5 offensive linemen leave the game. So obviously we're hoping for a clean bill of health on both sides. But going up against the Detroit Lions to start your season, that was asking a lot in prime time. So I like that this time, one, we don't have to wait as long. But two, I feel like the Texans, while they're a good matchup, it's not one of those like damning, like, oh man, like the Lions might have been one of the hottest teams going into last year. I feel like this is a good barometer for both teams, but I don't feel like these are impossible to win these type of games. And I'm really excited to see what ends up happening. But, you know, as far as a Texans win, and then I'll ask you what a Texans loss looks like, but a Texans win versus the Rams, what do the Texans have to do to win this football game?
They're going to have to play efficient on the offensive line, and CJ Stroud's going to have to play in a timely manner. I think that's really it. You know, last season, Texans gave up the second most sacks in the NFL. CJ Stroud was the second most sacked quarterback in the NFL. My bad, third most sacks in the NFL. CJ Stroud was the second most sacked quarterback in the NFL. Part of the problem with that is on the offensive line. The inconsistencies, the inability to win their one-on-one battles, but also part of it that we never talk about because you never want to blame the quarterback when it comes to this is the sack rate of the quarterback, not understanding his parameters, not understanding his situation, his timing, and ultimately, by the time that he finally decides to make a decision, the defensive lineman's in the backfield and he's holding by his leg and pulling him down. So Stroud this offseason in Nick Caley's offense has been working extremely hard to build not only a repetition, but also understand pocket awareness a lot better, attentiveness to where the pass rush is coming, and watching the footwork of the offensive lineman to be able to know when he has to step up in the pocket or when he just has to maneuver outside and get the ball out quickly. So you're going to have to do that in this game. You're going to have him play in an up-tempo fashion where it may end up being a 6-yard slant pattern to Jalen Noel, but you take the 6-yard slant and then you just run with it, because of at least then you're getting positive yardage and not living in 2nd and 17 by taking the sack. That's going to be a major element. I think the other side of the ball that's going to be huge for Houston, if they can win this game, they're going to have to force some takeaways. They're going to have to. This may end up being a very low-scoring game. I've talked to people around the league, and I've talked to some people that are also on the beat. And, like, the way that I've gathered, it feels like whoever gets to 17 fastest is going to win this football game. 17-14 final score, 20-17 final score, but whoever gets 17 is going to be that marker. The way for Houston to get to 17 is by forcing Los Angeles not to put up points by getting the ball back to their offense and playing keep away. That might be it. Because offensively, I just trust Sean McVay over Nick Caley just in this matchup. I trust that the offensive line, with even the unknown status, because he is going to play Ulrich Jackson, but like he's still, you always got to wonder with the blood clot situation. With the unknownness of how his role is going to be, I still trust this offense more than Houston's offense right now because the veteranship and the continuity. So you have got to play keep away if you're Houston. You've got to win the time of possession. You got to be able to trust that you can run the football. You got to be able to capitalize on third down. You got to milk as much time off the clock as possible. And you got to make sure that when your defense is on the field, you live up to the expectation of being one of the best secondaries in the league. You brought in C.J. Gardner-Johnson because if you finished second in the NFL in takeaways last year. He had 6 interceptions himself when he was in Philadelphia. So you got to get pressure on Matthew Stafford to throw off of his front foot under duress, avoid the hit, and then into double coverage to where you get the ball back to your offense. That's going to be the way that I think you're going to be able to win this football game if you're Houston, is not really doing much on your side of the offense, but making sure that Los Angeles doesn't do a damn thing on their side.
No, I agree with that. With Nick Chubb, where are you on him? Is this Nick Chubb of old, or is this a guy that, maybe you might be able to rely on for a game, but you're not exactly thrilled with the running back room without Joe Mixon right now?
So the way that I try to describe it to Texans fans, and they didn't like it, and they really are pissed at me because of I refuse to tell them what they want to hear, and I tell them what the facts are. It does feel like that Nick Chubb has a full tank and he's ready to go, and that there's more left in the fuel than he let on when he was in Cleveland. But the fuel tank may be a motorbike instead of an SUV. Like, it may end up being a very small engine that by week 5, you're like, holy crap, he is running out of juice. We have got to get somebody else in here. That might be it. He does look revitalized in this offense. I mean, Nick Caley, he did have a couple of really good runs throughout the practice against the Lions. He had a couple of good runs when he went up against the Carolina Panthers. He averaged 5 yards a play in the preseason game against Carolina on 5 carries. But here's the thing, Jake. If he runs it 20 times, what's he going to look like? Like, Texans fans are looking at that 5-yard placement and they go, that's the version of Nick Chubb. No, that is one drive of Nick Chubb. Now do it 25 more times in a game, because with no Joe Mixon, he may have to do that. And then if he does that, then we can have a conversation about him really being back in the saddle of 4-time Pro Bowler, all-pro running back, nearly an MVP candidate. We can have that conversation then. Or we have to look at it and say, yeah, he'll give you 1 or 2 drives that you are really, really seeing the validity of what he provides. And then we got to turn to Darian Gumawale, and we got to turn to Woody Marks, and we got to turn to Dameon Pierce because of he's getting you 2 yards and then he's stopping. So it's a lot of unknown right now. And I think that that's okay, but I think that that's the reality.
No, I like that you said that. And I think, obviously Joe Mixon is a significant loss in this game, but I also like that you mentioned, Nick Chubb in this game, this might be one of those. We saw Cooper Kupp go over 100 yards last year. He didn't do it a ton last year, but he looked good in the Lions game. Week 1 is probably the worst time to see Nick Chubb if you're a defense, because you're going to get probably the best from him at this point in the season, where, to your point, maybe a week 6, week 7, he's not as effective. All right, so Yeah. How do you see a Texans loss versus the Rams looking? What does that look like on Sunday if that happens?
The offensive line truly was just put together with scotch tape and a prayer and a wind of hope, and that's kind of it. I mean, like on paper, Jake, this is a massive, massive, massive advantage for Los Angeles. It just
I
is.
agree completely.
I mean, and that's not an insult to the Texans' offensive line. Where if any Texans fans come and watch this and they go, "Look at Cole hating on us again," no, it's just you gave up 54 sacks a season ago, and you replaced your offensive line with a rookie that hasn't played more than 25 snaps in live reps in a preseason game. That again, they weren't going up against full-time starters. A former first-round pick that has not been able to find a home and got overpaid by the New York Jets and Laken Tomlinson. A center that is coming off of a season-ending injury. Ed Ingram, who was basically told, you're going to be a backup in Houston, but now because we have an issue at the right tackle spot, you got to start. We viewed you as nothing more than a depth piece. And Titus Howard, who number one is oft injured, and number two, learned how to play right guard, only to have to go back to learning how to play right tackle. So it's like the advantage should be in favor of Los Angeles. And if that is the case, it's going to be a lot of quick throws. It's going to be a lot of movement to where you are going to have to get the ball out in a timely manner. And that might not even be enough because of the way the secondary of Los Angeles plays. I don't worry about this at all from the defensive side. And it's not me boasting and saying that I think the Texans have a top 5 unit because Los Angeles has a top 10 unit. They're going to be one of the best defenses in the NFL this year. But Houston, I think, is slightly better defensively. But it doesn't matter what your defense does if your offense can't get on the board, if it can't move the ball, if it ends up being slow as molasses. And that might be the case on Sunday out at SoFi Stadium. We get to the fourth quarter and it's 17-3. And it doesn't feel like that, the game is that far out of reach, but everybody in Houston's looking at the way the offensive line is playing and the inability to connect downfield with the wide receivers. And you're like, you might as well say it's 31-3 because there's no way that they're coming back. That is the way that Houston loses this football game.
No, I get that. Final score before I let you go?
I go 20-17. I think for some reason the defense of Houston's going to get after Los Angeles and Houston's going to walk away with a win. Now, to be fair, I have them losing their home opener next week to Tampa. Tampa on paper actually I think is a much more even keel matchup in favor of Houston. And I think that Houston loses big time at home. I think that this is just going to be one of those miraculous wins that you can't explain. You don't know how it happened, but Houston somehow prevails and they get the 3-point win.
All right, Cole. I got 30-20. I think we're going to see some fireworks. I just think when it's all said and done for this week, we're going to be like, wow, that looked very similar to that Super Bowl season when the Rams played the Bears and Stafford kind of came onto the scene. I just think that, yeah, this team is going to surprise some people. I have them winning 13 games this year. I think they're going to win the NFC. So
I have them winning the NFC West, and I have them playing the NFC Championship at 11-6. So
okay.
I'm very high on this Rams team.
Yeah,
I'm very high on where this team can go. I really do. The reason why, and I didn't get to bring this up, the reason why I love that they brought in Devontae Adams is because Puka Nakua's best routes are in the slot, and now we get to see him full time in the slot versus when he had to split it with Cooper Kupp. So I like the fact that Devontae Adams is a much better fit for what you want to do with your number one receiver. And both of them can be the number one receiver because, again, you brought this up. Devontae Adams hasn't lost a lot in the tank. So I'm not doubting this team at all. I'm not high on the 49ers. I'm actually really high on Arizona for some reason. I think I think they're going to be a sleeper in the NFC. If they're not in the playoffs, they're going to spoil a couple teams' playoff hopes. But I do think that they are the favorites for a reason. And I think they're going to play in the championship. Now, will they win the championship? Let's wait and see how the rest of the
season. No, Cole, appreciate you. Always appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. Any thing you want to shout out real quick before you head out?
If you love college football, go on over to SEC Unfiltered and College Football Addiction. We talk every single college football major game on both channels daily. And if you want to check out my written work, it's at Texans Wire. We're breaking down today's game. We're breaking down the entire season preview, where I have the Texans winning, where I have the Texans losing, what I think about this game, the matchup with Matthew Stafford, and a bunch of other things. And if you just like my stupid takes, go follow me at Mr. Cole Thompson on Twitter.
Sounds like a plan. Hey, Cole, appreciate you. And, good luck this weekend. It should be fun to cover.
Thanks, Jake, for having me on, bud.
Of course. You take care, man. All right, guys. So that was Cole, the expert there for the Texans, and I mean, man, that was fun. You know, he knows stuff so well, and you know, he's always able to break things down in a way that's just it's a lot easier. You know, and I think the interesting thing when you look at this game is really, at least for me, is you look at that running back room, and we talked about like with Nick Chubb, right? If Nick Chubb ends up being, you know, the Nick Chubb of old, well, now you have a play action passing attack, right? Now you can run play action with CJ Stroud. Now you can make things easier on CJ Stroud. I think, you know, obviously the weapons galore. I mean, you got Nico Collins, you got Jaden Higgins, you got Jalen Noel, you got Christian Kirk. A lot of speed all over the field, despite the fact you're not going to have Tank Dell. I think Woody Marks is an interesting player in this game as well, because he can, you know, threaten as a pass catcher out of the backfield. And then I think the offensive line, as Cole put beautifully, they really were not put together extremely well. Ariante Ursary starting at left tackle now over Cam Robinson, who they signed. Robinson was horrendous in the postseason for the Vikings. Laken Tomlinson, like Cole said, overpaid by the Jets. Straight overpaid. Jake Andrews coming off a season-ending injury last year. Ed Ingram, kind of a throwaway, like he said, backup. Now he's starting. Titus Howard was supposed to be the right guard. Now he's going to be starting at right tackle, has to relearn the position. It just seems like too much is going on. Whereas the Rams, the offensive line, the biggest issue is Alaric Jackson's blood clots. He's still going to play, but does that pop up? Does he, you know, and then you look, and it's like Steve Avila, he had a tough year last year, but he's already shown you his rookie year, he was fantastic. Then you have at center Coleman Shelton. This is somebody that the Rams wanted to bring back last year. He earned a raise. The Rams tried to negotiate. He went to the Bears, and the Rams went out and got Jonah Jackson. Kevin Dotson, one of the best guards in football, and Rob Havenstein is one of the better tackles in football. So I feel like clear advantage for the Rams offensive line over the Texans offensive line. Dalton Schultz, Cade Stover, those are your tight ends for the Houston Texans. How much are we going to see Cade Stover? I do not know, but Dalton Schultz is somebody, possession type of guy, can move the chains. Then the defense, and I disagree with Cole. I do think the Rams have a better defense, but I get it. The Texans have some really good players. Will Anderson, of course. Daniil Hunter, Henry To'oTo'o, Azeez Al-Shaair, right? Christian Harris, who we mentioned. EJ Speed is also a part of this team, as well as Jake Hansen. They got some depth in the linebacker room. They have a really good corner room with Derek Stingley, Kamari Lassiter, Jalen Petrie, CJ Gardner-Johnson. We mentioned Kalen Bullock is good in run support. This is a really good defense. That said, I don't love the defensive line. I think Sheldon Rankins, like he mentioned, is definitely the most important of the two, but of the trenches there. Mario Edwards Jr., Tommy Togiai, Tim Settle Jr., these guys don't really scare me. Folu Fadukasi. I think we're looking at a team that is going to be able to run against this Texans defense. I think we're looking at a team that will be able to get going against this Texans defense. But I also think that the Rams pass rush is going to get there for CJ Stroud. So I have 30-20. Cole has the Texans winning 20-17. And we move on. Of course, today's sponsor is Sleeper. And let's make some picks, shall we? So over on Sleeper, you can get in on the action. Use my code JKB when you sign up for Sleeper. You're going to get a 100% match up to $100. And Sleeper is the best app to play fantasy football, to play, you know, to make your picks. I mean, it is the best app. So be sure to check it out. So we're looking right now at this, and, you know, I'll say this right now. When you look at Stafford, 241.5 passing yards, CJ Stroud, we're going to pick all of these. So I'm going to probably go with more here for Matthew Stafford. I think Stafford throws 250 plus. So I like that. I think Stroud is going to throw more than 231.5. Rushing yards, tough one there. Chubb, I kind of feel like he's going to have more than 43.5. That seems really low, but it is interesting because you have a Dare Agumbawale, you have, of course, Dameon Pierce and Woody Marks, so I could see that being a little interesting there. Stroud, not going to touch that one. Kyren, I think he's going to run for more than 69.5. I think that's beautiful. I probably would have set Kyren at 82.5, so I think that is a beautiful number there. Kyren should be able to run against this defense. Then you look at the receiving, and I am really liking Devontae Adams here. Now, I think Nakua can end up with more yards this year than Adams. I think Adams is going to end up scoring more. He's going to have more touchdowns. So I'm going to go with Adams here. I'm going to go with, I like Dalton Schultz to have more than 23.5. I like Tutu Atwell to have at least 25 yards. And then let's see here. So we got that. And what is hot here? Oh, there's the alt. Okay. Well, that's cool. So, yeah, that. What is hot right now is Kyren Williams anytime touchdown. Nico Collins anytime touchdown. I like Devontae Adams anytime touchdown. I guess we'll grab that instead of the yards. And then we'll go with Terrence Ferguson's an interesting one. Nate Landman, I like the more than 7.5 total tackles. And I like what he was talking about with Petrie. So if we can find something there, I like the Petrie comment that he made. And then you got passing touchdowns. So anyway, now there you go. You got Stafford, Stroud, Kyren, Schultz, Atwell, Adams, and Landman. That's going to give you, if you say you do $10, you can win up to $460 if all of these hit. So be sure to check out Sleeper. The link will be in the description, the comments section below. But yeah, I'm really excited for this game. I think it's a really good opportunity for the Rams to kind of gauge where they're at early on, going against a legit team. Like, if you win this game, I don't care how you win it. I have 30-20. They can win this game 10-7 for all I care. This is an impressive win regardless. Beating a team like this is impressive. I don't care that they're at home. Beating a team like this is impressive regardless. And Sean McVay, Lord knows Sean McVay, he wins openers. He's done a really nice job. It's kind of crazy when you think about how dominant he's been in week one. And they still, despite everything that went on, they've lost twice. Sean McVay's lost 2 openers. The Bills game, which for whatever reason, it felt like they were in for the majority, and then it kind of, they ran away with it. The Bills did outplay them, but there were injury after injury after injury. And then last year with the Lions, Puka going down the second quarter, 4 of the 5 offensive linemen going down. A lot of injuries, right? Darius Williams not playing. That's the thing. So this is a golden opportunity, but Sean McVay has these guys normally very prepared, and I'm expecting no different. I think Sean McVay goes to SoFi Stadium against this Houston Texans team. I think what we see on Sunday, if I'm predicting what we see, I said 30-20. I think we're going to see at the start. The Texans have a good script. Opening script helps. I think Nick Caley is going to, develop a good opening script. I think they're going to get rid of the ball quickly. So that's the thing. I don't think it's going to be anything crazy where, CJ Stroud sacked 8 times. But I think they're going to get rid of the ball very quickly. And I think it's going to be kind of reminiscent to that Raiders game in 2018, the year the Rams went to the Super Bowl. and you're watching that game and you see Derek Carr's just getting rid of the ball quickly, right? When you have a really good pass rush, it's almost too good. Offenses have to adjust. The easiest way to slow down a pass rush is to just make sure the ball comes out quicker. And when you have guys like a Christian Kirk that can win after the catch, you have a Woody Marks, you have Dalton Schultz, you can do that. So that's something to keep in mind there. And I do think that's what we're going to see. But a big staple, what I've noticed since Chris Shula became the defensive coordinator, is how nasty this team looks. Click and close. This is a team that's quick to the ball. We're going to see good tackling, open field tackling. I think for that reason, the Rams will control it. And then I think the Rams offense is going to click. I just do. I think we're going to be sitting here on Monday or after the game, and we're going to be like, wow. And depending on who it was, we're going to be like, wow, we were right. The mainstream people tried to tell us, yeah, this, and this. But the reality is things haven't really changed. The Rams, they don't play their starters. They don't even play their backups in preseason. This is nothing new. Matthew Stafford plays through injuries. Way worse than that back issue. Way worse. Right? Sean McVay, more often than not, wins the first game of the year. That, I think we're going to be looking at this defense. They take the next step. They're top 5 this year. The offense is top 5. Now, we'll see what ends up happening, but I feel really good about this LA Rams team. I have for a while. I think they are going to win the Super Bowl, but it starts with week 1. So, in conclusion, Rams win 30-20. My guest, Cole Thompson, who's with Texans Wire, the managing editor of Texans Wire, does a really nice job. You know, he has the Texans winning 20-17, but he does have the Rams going to the NFC title game, so it's not like he's, you know, out on the Rams. I tend to believe we're going to see Devontae Adams catch a touchdown in this one. We're going to see a Kyron Williams running game. We're going to see some really good defensive play. I think they're going to get after Stroud, but again, he's going to get rid of the ball quickly. If Landman has 14 tackles in this game, I won't be shocked. I'm not saying he will, but he's going to have a lot of tackles. Really good tackler. I wouldn't be surprised if he forces a fumble. Akella Witherspoon versus Nico Collins is huge. Devontae Adams versus Derek Stingley Jr. is huge. Kamari Lassiter versus Apuka Nakua is huge. What does Tutu Atwell's role look like? That's another thing that I'm really fascinated by. Because Atwell really has not been utilized for the majority of his career with the Rams until they have to, and he normally comes through. But now, you paid him. He's not on a rookie deal anymore. You paid him $10 million for this year. How much do we see Tutu Atwell? How much do we see Jordan Whittington? How do they break up the running back carries? How does that work? Right? The cornerback rotation that we know we're getting, it's going to be Akella Witherspoon and Emmanuel Forbes Jr., but how much do we see a Darius Williams? How much do we see Kobe Durant? Tank McCullough, we were hearing he's going to have a bigger role. What does that look like? What does it look like for a Josh Wallace? It's going to be very fascinating. The Rams have a lot of different moving pieces in a good way. What are we going to see with newly now number 10? That feels weird. Number 10, edge defender, Josiah Stewart, taking Cooper Kupp's number. How much of a role is he going to play? But yeah, Rams win 1-0. I believe they will be one of 3 teams that are 1-0 in the NFC West. I think the Texans are going to the Cardinals are going to beat the Saints. It'll be somewhat of a close game, but I think the Cardinals win. And I think the Seattle Seahawks are going to beat the 49ers. You know, Cole mentioned he's high on Arizona for some reason. I'm actually higher on Seattle. I think Seattle has a good roster, but we'll see. Let me know, comments section below. Be sure to hype the video, like the video. Be sure to subscribe for more content. We got LQ coming on, I believe tomorrow. So excited for that. Also, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. That's 2:30 p.m. on the West Coast. If you missed Cameron Lynch and I, we are back. We are going to be doing Off the Edge again this year. Week 1 coverage. We're going to be picking the Week 1 games. We're excited. So join us over on the Off the Edge channel. The link is going to also be in the comment section, and, well, it'll be in the description, and it's on my channel. Or you could just search Off the Edge, Jake and Cam. So that is going to do it. I appreciate you guys tuning in, hanging out, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Shout out to Sleeper as always for sponsoring today's live stream. Later, folks.